Following the Nintendo financial report, a lot of people are desperately trying to downplay the success of the company, downplay the success of the Switch 2, and especially downplaying the success of several of the games, particularly Metroid Prime 4 and Mario Tennis Fever. Over the past couple of months, we've seen this narrative that like games like Kirby Air Riders, games like Metroid Prime 4, games like Mario Tennis Fever have failed, that they're not succeeding, that they're that nobody cares about them and nobody likes them, and they're not driving console sales, and that's very observably not true. And these are games that are going to sell like throughout the console generation, because this is the thing that people don't seem to understand about Nintendo games. You are going to see these games sell for 5 to 6 years. Okay, if these games sell like 200,000 a quarter, that's like almost $1 million a year. Okay, 800,000 a year, right? That adds up. Okay, like these are games that will like lifetime maybe sell like 2, 3, 4, 5 million units, and yet considering like the resources that were put into them, considering like how low budget they were, like this is going to net them a nice tidy profit. Like people need to stop acting as if it's unreasonable for a game to sell like 1 to 2 million units, because like this, people don't seem to understand this, is that not everything sells as well as Animal Crossing or Mario Kart. Like the simple fact of the matter is, for most games, 2 to 3 million is a huge success. Again, if Metroid Prime 4 had sold 2 million units, that would have been like the best-selling Metroid Prime game ever. So what we're seeing here is that we have this weird misconception on like what a game needs to be successful and what it needs to get a sequel. Because one of the things we're seeing a lot of right now is that we're seeing a lot of people say that like Metroid is not going to get any further entries because Metroid Prime 4 was so poorly received, and because it sold so poorly, even though there's like no indication for of that happening. You know, like one of the things people are trying to do now is that like, oh, this is the lowest scoring Metroid Prime game ever, like as if Federation Force doesn't exist, as if Hunters doesn't exist. It's like nobody really believes that. Like, it's not true. And even if it was, the series has like such a high pedigree anyway that like it would easily be able to make a comeback from this with a sequel. Okay? Like we saw this happen with Star Fox, right? Where the narrative was that Star Fox Zero was this huge disaster. It was this epic failure, that it killed the IP. And then a decade later, we get a new one that becomes the best selling in the series. Like, again, people set the bar so low for these franchises. They tell people that they can't possibly get any worse. And then, you know, people believe it. Nintendo puts out a new game, and all of a sudden, like, they can't really do damage control anymore. You know, we've seen this for years with games like Super Mario Bros. Coming in after, like, new Super Mario Bros. Like, you know, Zelda after, like, the DS Zeldas, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker. Like, I know people who still will try and tell you that Wind Waker was a bad game. Okay? Like, I know people like that. And it's just such a fringe niche thing now that, like, it's very hard for fans today to even, like, process, like, where these people are coming from. Because, like, obviously Wind Waker is not a bad game, but the reason why it became so controversial was because of the alleged, you know, childishness of it and the visuals, you know? Like, outside of that, like, the game was very, very, very well received. And it's something that people just can't bring themselves to accept. Like, what we're seeing today with, like, you know, people complaining about the character redesigns and, like, these remakes and, like, these new Nintendo games, like, it's the same, it's the Wind Waker thing all over again, where people are spurging out about franchises, like, you know, making changes and being different and not being what they expected, and then being surprised when over time people start liking the changes and appreciating them more. Okay, you know, I grew up in the NES era, okay? You know, I was like 20 years old when the original Legend of Zelda launched in 86, okay? Like, the Legend of Zelda, for a long time, like, everybody just wrote off everything that came after it, okay? You know, everyone hated Zelda 2, everyone hated A Link to the Past, everyone hated Link's Awakening or didn't talk about it, everyone hated Ocarina, everyone hated Majora's Mask, everyone hated the Oracle games. Like, this just continued on and on and on, like, forever. It's just like, it's just the reality of it, is that people spent years and years and years telling people that Nintendo was on the way out, that they were failing, that Zelda used to be good, but fell off at some point. But nobody was able to decide on, like, when it fell off or how it did. And initially they settled on this idea that, like, well, the games aren't open world like Skyrim anymore. And what happens? They just put out Breath of the Wild, and that becomes the best-selling game in the series. You know, like, it's just remarkable how the industry is, like, rallying to try and continue this farce that, like, Nintendo games are struggling. Like Star Fox, you know, like, it wasn't that long ago where people were trying to tell you that rail shooters were obsolete and that they couldn't possibly make another one. And here we are getting a new one that's already hugely successful, and, like, you know, the industry's attempts at, like, trying to gaslight you to think, well, actually, Assault was way better. Like, it's not influencing anyone. Like, no one thinks this. Like, this is what we're seeing now, is that we're seeing, like, you know, all these people who have spent, like, the past 10, 20 years just trying to downplay all these Nintendo games. They have to contend with the fact that they aren't considered fans by those of us who have stuck with the company throughout these decades. You know, people who have played everything that comes out, people who have a way better understanding of the brand and, like, the developers than they do. Like, these guys have this weird sense of nostalgia and entitlement and believe that certain franchises are way bigger than they actually are. You know, Metroid is probably the case in point example, where fans believe it's one of the most instrumental, iconic, like, Nintendo franchises ever, where, like, you know, the developers know it's a fringe niche thing with, like, a cult following. Like, that's and the developers are right about that. Like, Metroid is not a particularly mainstream brand, and it shouldn't try to be, but at the same time, like, this is why we don't get a lot of games. This is why Metroid isn't really a priority for them, and it's why we shouldn't freak out when the game only sells over 1 million units, okay? Like, that's not that big of a deal for Metroid, okay? Obviously, they accounted for this in development, and obviously, it's something that they're going to have to deal with going forward, but, like, Metroid is and always has been niche. And, like, trying to say that, like, a niche game like this, like, should be, like, getting, like, endless amounts of support and should be selling, like, you know, tens of millions of units, like, all of that is extraordinarily unrealistic. And it's high time that people really process that, like, most Nintendo games aren't going to sell more than a couple of million units.